Part 127. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1264. Jumping forward, the person who stopped Gretel was Ashu-i-sang, who had been watching Gretel's movements. When the elf warrior stood in front of the silver moon deer, his entire body suddenly became extremely huge, doubling his height. He stretched out his arms easily and hugged Apie's neck. Don't go yet. If the elders can't do it, it's useless for you to get involved. Good Appa, you don't want anything to happen to your boss, right? The silver moon deer neighed twice, landed its front hooves on the ground, lowered its head and rubbed against Ashu-i-sang. The next moment, Ashu-ej's body quickly shrank and returned to its original shape. Little Gretel, I know you are worried about your mother, but don't be too impulsive. Look, everyone is waiting here. The elders can handle it. Gretel pursed his lips and remained silent, looking up at the mountains in the distance. The ancient trees supporting the royal court seemed to loosen up, twisting their bodies and waving their thick branches, sending black smoke billowing around them and causing birds to fly away in fright. The whole scene, although this is a bit disrespectful to the elf royal court, looks like Grandma Gishu attacking Yan Chixia with all her strength. In the midst of the smog, 5 birds, headed by a golden eagle, plunged towards the roots of the tree. After a while, billowing green steam rose up and spread along the roots of the trees. Look, the elders have taken action. Ashu-ej said in surprise. The voice was soft, as if a slightly louder voice would distract the elders and disturb them from casting spells. That's an ancient tree. It's the world tree. It requires the cooperation of many elders to appease the world tree. Even if it's just a little bit close, you'll be in big trouble. Beside Ashu-i-sang, Gretel was also holding his breath and staring. After that wave of green energy rose up, more green energy soon followed. Like the ocean tide, one wave after another, beating upwards in all directions, gradually wrapping around half of the tree trunk. It was obvious that countless elders had taken action together to mobilize the power of nature on a large scale. And that violent ancient tree actually gradually became quiet under such large-scale energy infusion. Around the ancient tree, the huge tree trunks spread out like braids, were retracted, and little by little, they were woven into the original tree tower, firmly supporting the royal court. The power of nature is indeed the purest, gentlest, and most friendly power to plants. Gretel sighed secretly, and then slowly moved forward with the team that was moving again. Beside her, Ashu-ej had already mounted her walking somber, accompanying Greet, her eyebrows tangled together. The world tree is so angry, the ancient trees around, the ancient trees around. Gretel didn't know what the condition of the surrounding ancient trees was, and he didn't dare to think about it. He didn't even dare to use his mental strength to try to communicate with the giant tree in the distance. He just kept walking with the team. Along the way, he silently opened the cloud chamber magic, and at the same time quietly took out a Geiger counter and hung it on the tip of Appa's long horn. Thankfully, there were no readings in the cloud chamber and the Geiger counter didn't scream. In other words, no matter how the elves tinker with their well of eternity nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, nuclear reactors, fat men, thin little boys, etc., at least their nuclear pollution has not spread so far. Gretel waved to Ashu-i-sang. Seeing several familiar elves surrounding him, he leaned down from Appa's back and lowered his voice. Everyone, turn on the cloud chamber magic, hang up the Geiger counter, and hang up the magic to resist radioactivity. I'm always worried that something is wrong with the Well of Eternity. It's not that the Well of Eternity and the one in the elf secret realm are they the same? The young elves looked at each other, and their faces became serious. Led by Ashu-ej and Idian, rows of magical auras flashed one after another. Greet looked at their actions and relaxed slightly. Well, as long as you are prepared in advance and don't go in if you notice something strange, Even if there is a radioactive leak in the well of eternity, it should be, no problem, right? These elves can't really cause a nuclear explosion, right? Probably not. There has been an explosion in the elf secret realm before, you won't make the same mistake again, right? They prepared themselves and moved on. In the past, we had to walk downhill from a mountain to the top of the mountain where the Elf King's court was located, and we had to walk an extremely long distance. It could almost be described as looking at the mountain and running to death. Fortunately, they were riding mid to high level monsters with long stamina and were able to move forward steadily without any problems such as breathing heavily, trembling legs, sweating profusely, or being unable to walk. After reaching the foot of the mountain, the elves jumped off their mounts one after another, said goodbye to the Sika deer, somber, moon deer, reindeer, and so on, and prepared to continue going up the mountain. Gretel hesitated for a moment whether to climb down the deer's back or not. At the entrance of the mountain pass, two guards appeared. "Hey, new kid." They wore gray-green bark armor, one carried a bow and arrow, and the other had a moon blade hanging from his waist. The one with the moon blade took a step forward, raised his arms high, and waved vigorously at Gretel. "It's best not to ride your silver moon deer on the way up the mountain." "Ah, can't Wang Ting ride a mount?" Greet was a little confused. "Are civilians not allowed to ride? Or is the half-elf not allowed to ride? Or, only legendary elders or very old elves can be ridden?" He raised his head vigorously and looked up at the royal court above. Standing at the foot of the mountain and looking over, you already need to raise your head and torso at 90 degrees, or even slightly bend your knees and tilt your back to see the full view of the ancient tree. The huge world tree supporting Wangting was like a thick dark green cloud, suspended above their heads. The tree crown spreads out, and the entire foot of the mountain is shrouded in the shadow of the giant tree. The height of that giant tree, according to visual inspection, is 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers. "Ah, it's not that riding is not allowed." The two guards looked at each other and laughed at the same time, obviously very familiar with Gretel's reaction. The guard who was still hanging the moon blade carefully moved the moon blade back, took 2 steps closer, pointed sideways towards the mountain and said, "It's just that the road up the mountain is very steep. It might be even harder for you to ride such a big silver moon deer. Otherwise, would you consider leaving him at the bottom of the mountain? We have a special place here for animal companions to live. They will live there. Very comfortable." Gretel looked up in the direction of his finger. As far as the eye can see, it is not a flat road around the mountain, nor is it a climbing trail hanging down step by step. One by one, thick dark brown roads wind down the mountain made of earth and rocks. Each mountain road is raised above the mountain, ranging from tens of meters wide to several meters narrow. These roads are not flat, but rise and fall, with an arch rising from time to time. The largest arch bridge has a span of more than 100 meters and a slope of more than 45 degrees. There are also some places where they intersect with each other and need to be drilled through narrow holes. Obviously, it is a bit painful for the silver moon deer, which is good at running on the plains, to climb such a steep mountain road. Moreover, those big horns would get stuck in a tree hole if not kept intact. Each avenue branched off into countless small paths, with crisscrossing branches and branches that wrapped around the entire mountain peak like a fishing net. If you look closely, you will see that it is clearly not a mountain path, but thick or thin tree roots. Even the textures on those mountain paths look like the bark of a giant tree. The wide gaps in the texture became natural steps, and the elves in the front row had already stepped on these steps and began to climb up in an orderly manner. "How's it going? It's your first time here. Are you surprised to see such a huge tree?" The guard smiled and gestured to them. Looking back, a proud smile suddenly froze on his face. Gretel and Bernard had jumped off the deer's back. Then, with a pop sound, the tall silver moon deer turned into a 7 or 8-year-old boy wearing a knee-length white robe under his nose. You can even ride such a small child. You are so awesome. Gretel. It's not what you think. I can explain it. In the end, he summoned a phantom pony to take his place and walked leisurely on the mountain road. From the foot of the mountain to halfway up the mountain, there is almost all bare earth and rocks, wrapped by the huge roots of the world tree. 2/3 of the way up the mountain, very unusually, patches of tall saplings began to appear. Oak, green oak, red pine, cedar, fir trees. In the nursery, there are elves looming, taking care of them intently. These are the descendants of ancient trees. Although this place looks barren, it is closer to the well of eternity and absorbs more power every day. There is a greater chance of growing into ancient trees. A disciple of Elder Melancela specially approached Gretel and pointed to him to explain. There are dedicated compatriots to observe them and take care of them. Among a batch, only the best ones can be kept, and the rest will be transplanted to the forest below. Going up further, the trees become taller and thicker. All the way to the top of the mountain, there is a circle of ancient trees surrounding the circular crater. It takes more than a dozen people to surround each tree, and its trunk is as tall as a 10-story building. Every ancient tree is guarded by elf guards. The elf who had been pointing out the surroundings for Gretel even lowered his voice. These ancient trees are all branches of the world tree. They are planted next to the well of eternity to assist the world tree in sorting out the well of eternity. He pointed to the small and exquisite tree houses 20 or 30 meters away from the root of the tree, with a look of reverence on his face. The elders who appease the ancient trees sometimes leave the ancient trees and rest in these houses. But most of the time, the tree houses are empty, just like Arian. Speed up. An elf rushed over from the world tree in the center of the mountain, pulling the vines and sliding down. Don't waste time here. The elder said, hurry up and take Gretel to Ms. Iluni. Gretel's heart was beating wildly. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1265. Lady Iluni. The original mother? What's up with her? The rage of the world tree and the ancient tree just now, Elder Fahim and the others have certainly tried their best to appease them, but what about the others? What about the other people who are dedicated to appeasing the ancient trees? What about the other people who were already meditating among the ancient trees? Did they, or rather they, withstand the first wave of impact, the most serious injuries, both physically and mentally? Gretel suddenly felt flustered. Obviously that was the original mother, not his own mother, but he still felt his heart pounding, hitting the front wall of his chest, almost as if it was about to break through. He wanted to nod to the elf holding the vine and swinging over, and stood there, silently reciting the incantation. After a moment, a pair of golden red wings spread out behind him, and the whole person rose up. Where is my mother? Take me there quickly. At the same time, a pair of silver dragon wings spread out from behind Cyrilla, floating side by side with him. Bernard stood on the ground with his head raised, reaching up to grab a handful of air, his face full of confusion. And me? And me? Boss, give me a group flying technique. I can't fly. Bernard was quite steady, he just stretched his hand upward without making a sound. At the feet of the barbarian, Appa was already jumping up and down, stretching his hands upward, and screaming. Hey! There's me too. Greed had already increased his speed, rushed to the side of the vines, and reached out to grab the elf. With a pop sound, the entire lower half of the vine rolled up, and it was whipped towards Gretel, passing 1 meter in front of him. At the same time, Idian and Ashu-Isang, one on each side, jumped up. Idian held Gretel in his arms, and Ashu Isang held Sirila in his arms, drawing an arc and pulling them to the ground by gravity. Fall down. Come down quickly. You can't fly casually here in Wangting. If you want to fly, wait until you go back to see World Tree and let World Tree know you before flying. Listen to people's advice and eat enough. Greed flapped his dragon-flying wings and slowly landed on the ground. As for Sarara, it was Ashu Isang who let out a low roar and transformed into a huge panther in mid-air, which forced her to drop a foot. Oh, it's normal for the Elf King's palace to have an air defense identification system and not to fly around. Grey calmed down and looked at Idian hopefully. How do we go? In which direction? Follow me. The elf who came to guide the way closed and opened his hands, and soon his feet landed on the ground. He quickly stepped forward, shook Gretel's hand, and nodded to him enthusiastically. Are you Gretel Nordmark? I am Taras Silosian, a disciple of Elder Jalat. The elder asked me to pick you up, this way, follow me. After saying that, he turned around and landed on all fours, turning into a leopard and shooting out like arrows. Greed quickly summoned the phantom pony, got on his horse, and rushed upward. I saw the leopard running forward for a while, using all four legs together, and ran up a thick vine that was enough for 5 people to walk side by side. Run for a while, jump on another vine, run a few more steps, jump on another branch. Those vines wrap around the world tree, one by one, all diagonally upward at an angle of 30 degrees to 45 degrees. From time to time, there would be a gap of 1 or 2 feet in the middle, but the leopard ran as if it were on flat ground. The body stretches and contracts, stretches and contracts. The front paws stretched forward, and the tail flicked gently to maintain balance. From time to time, it would be a 90-degree sharp turn, a 135-degree turn. Fortunately, the phantom colt has 4 hooves riding on the wind, and is not afraid of all kinds of strange terrain, clinging tightly to the back. Greed lay on the back of the phantom colt, jumped forward, hugged the phantom colt's neck to stabilize his body, and looked back in fear. Except for Sirila, who also summoned the phantom pony, almost all the elves who had lived in the forest before uniformly turned into leopards and followed closely behind. Ashmoonsong even turned her head and picked up the human form of Appa on her back. Some of the elves who came from Everlasting Island turned into leopards, some into wolf form, and some into birds. Of course, some did not transform, but deployed flying skills, surrounded by magical light, and followed them on their way. Even Bernard, 2 elves helped to bless floating, acceleration, and agility spells, dragging him along. Of course, even if there is no one to support him, Bernard can still run fast enough. Greed let out a long sigh. Alas, if you have to go up and down like this every day in the Elf King's court, this place is really not suitable for low-level spellcasters and warriors. No wonder the guidance left by the original mother cannot be touched until reaching level 10. If the original person took the warrior route, he must have reached level 10 to live a decent life in the Elf King's court. Fortunately, he is now a level 13 spellcaster, a magician, and a nature priest. Well, even though he is a natural priest and understands everything, he can't help but the world loves him. Naturally, he loves him, right? Gretel rode the phantom pony and ran forward following the elf named Taras Silosian. He is now at level 13. Although the phantom pony he summoned cannot fly yet, it can already walk through the air for a short time. He followed Tara closely, turned, jumped, and ran for more than a quarter of an hour before arriving in front of an ancient tree. The ancient tree has a beautiful shape and a straight and smooth trunk. Compared with the surrounding gray-green and gray-brown trees, you can tell the difference at a glance. The branches, leaves, and even the bottom of the leaves are covered with a faint silver light. Standing in the distance and looking up, it feels like the entire ancient tree is immersed in the moonlight from top to bottom, bathing in the grace of Lady Silver Moon. Ah, it really looks like an ancient tree that his mother would like, Or, in other words, it really looks like an ancient tree that an elf girl who was born into an elf nobleman, traveled the continent when she was young, and married a young knight for love. Terracero stopped running a few hundred meters in front of the ancient tree, transformed back into her elf form, and walked forward slowly. He chatted with the two guards in front of the treehouse for a few words, then waved to Gretel and led him forward. "This is Ms. Iluni's son, Gret Nordmark. Teacher Gelat asked me to take Gret to the ancient tree to meet his mother." The two guards looked at Gretel up and down, feeling a little embarrassed. Gretel's heart tightened. "What's wrong? My mother has something happened to her." "Ms. Iluni, I haven't left the ancient tree for 10 years," the younger guard whispered. He turned around and glanced at the ancient tree, then hesitated. "Every time they go in to appease the ancient trees, they will fall into deep meditation." "Not necessarily, they will come out to meet people, right?" "And the ancient tree was a little restless just now, and it finally calmed down," the older guard added. "I don't know if Ms. Iluni will overdraw. Anyway, please be mentally prepared, you may not be able to see people." Gretel took a deep breath and clenched his fists, feeling that his palms were a little wet. There were gentle footsteps behind her, and Cyrilla carefully approached him, shook his hand, and put a chain into his hand. "Don't worry, it's okay. We are all here. Wear this forehead ornament, it can amplify your mental power. It should make it easier to sense your mother," he said, and pushed him gently on the back. Greet staggered out for 2 steps, calmed down, put on the forehead ornament, and then slowly walked towards the ancient tree. The ground around the ancient tree is very flat. There are no protruding tree roots or rocks that can hurt your feet. It is all a piece of thin grass. Gretel, however, walked 1 foot higher and 1 foot lower. He simply pulled out the oak staff, turned it into the shape of an eyebrow stick, and walked forward with it. It took a long time to reach the foot of the ancient tree. Gretel took a few deep breaths, adjusted his mentality, and found a flat and soft place. Holding the oak staff in one hand and pressing it on the tree trunk with the other, he tried to emit spiritual power and communicate with the ancient tree. Communication cannot. The ancient tree in front of him was like a piece of cold wood, and he ignored him. Gretel paused, inserted the oak staff, stepped forward, and hugged the trunk of the tree with both hands. He rested his forehead on the tree trunk, buried himself wholeheartedly in the embrace of the tree, and communicated again. This time it had a slight effect, but only a little. In the sea of consciousness, far, far away, a small point of light lit up, wrapped in a thick barrier. "Alas, I feel like I can't last long like this. No way. Make a big move." Greet slid down and leaned against the tree trunk, letting one end of the oak staff sink diagonally into the ground and the other end against the trunk. Then, holding the oak staff with both hands, he raised his head, pressed the back of his head against the tree trunk, and slowly entered meditation. The mental power spreads out, spreads out, spreads out as much as possible. It wraps around the ancient tree behind it, reaching up to the crown, down to the roots, and in the middle, it goes deep into the tree. Don't rush to clear your thoughts first, but try your best to calm your mind and convey your warm, calm, peaceful and open mood through your mental power. Soon, a very anxious and frantic existence lit up in the sea of consciousness. Ah! 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 Greet felt as if his consciousness was rolling in the stormy waves, or as if he was being tortured by magma. He endured it hard, trying to stay conscious and pass on his consciousness. "Hello. I am Gretel Nordmark." He is a half-elf. "Dear ancient tree, how are you? Where can I help you?" As he asked, he tried to visualize the ocean, the sky, and the boundless fairy forest. Calling for the emerald dream, calling for the will of the world, calling for the pure, heavy, gentle, and tolerant power. Finally, the anxious existence in the sea of consciousness calmed down a little. and at that moment, another consciousness joined in. Gretel Nordmark? Is it little Gretel? Is it my little Gretel here? You, who are you? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @XianYuan20 for the 2000 starting coin reward. Thank you I am the chairman of the board and I want to reward you with 500 starting coins on Apple mobile phones. Please use the web version. If you use the mobile version, Apple will deduct a lot of money and it will be credited 3 months later. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 1266. Gretel froze. Even his spiritual power that spread out and enveloped the ancient tree became a little wavering. Although he told himself over and over again that Eluni Imagil was the original mother and his own mother. He should regard her as his mother, at least during the time he is on Yangju Island, he should regard her as his mother. Even as a doctor, he should comfort the sad mother and not stab her in the heart. However, he can deceive everyone in the world, but he cannot deceive himself. The soul contained in this body does not belong to the child of the elf and human knight, the real Gretel Nordmark. Instead, it already belonged to a soul floating from another world, Wuzhou, the former deputy chief physician of the emergency department. Moreover, he originally planned to play a child who left his mother before he could remember, and was a little alienated, but still polite. Who knew that the first contact would be at the level of spiritual power and spiritual power? How to deceive people? How can we deceive people in our thoughts and consciousness, or convey wrong information? Greed withdrew his mental power like a burning fire, and even accidentally entered a meditative state. The elves standing dozens of meters away from the ancient tree only saw him sitting upright suddenly, sweating profusely, and his eyes wide open, as if he had a nightmare. Gretel. Sirrah rushed over in one step. The whole person pulled out an after-image, rushed to Gretel, squatted down and held his shoulders. What's wrong with you? How are you? Greet shook his head blankly, unable to form words at the moment. As soon as the silver dragon girl moved, a group of people rushed over in the distance, especially the 2 sentries guarding the ancient tree. They rushed over from the left and the right, and put their hands on the tree trunk. Ms. Eluni, are you okay? Do you need help? No reply. The mental power of the 2 sentinels fluctuated so much that Gretel could hear it clearly even if he wasn't meditating, but he still didn't get a response. The ancient tree stood quietly, with a section of silver light flowing from the treetop to the bottom of the trunk, as if it had suddenly turned into an ordinary tree without wisdom, or as if it had fallen into an eternal sleep. This. The 2 elf sentries looked at each other awkwardly. Although it is normal for an ancient tree to ignore people, it is a tree after all, and you cannot expect it to be as lively as a human being, but today, it had just made a fuss and was calmed down with great difficulty. Suddenly there was no sound again, and suddenly the link was broken again. Will Ms. Eluni be okay? This new half-elf is the son of Ms. Eluni. The elder specially ordered him to come down and said he was a distinguished guest. Will he be okay? Do you want to notify an elder to come and take a look? While he was struggling, Gretel had already raised a smile to the elves and waved his hands to indicate that he was fine. Then, take a deep breath, lean back, and enter meditation again. Extending one's head is a sword, and shrinking one's head is also a sword. Now that we have arrived at Yangju Island, we will always have to face this problem. To describe it in metaphysical language, if you occupy someone else's body and owe someone else's karma, you will always have to pay it back. Of course, Gretel was not prepared to face the sufferer unprepared and tell them, your child is no longer here, dead, and there is a new soul in this body. Hurt an innocent mother? To hurt a mother who is strong in shouldering her responsibilities while loving and missing her son? To harm a lady who had closed herself in an ancient tree and meditated for more than 10 years for the welfare of her tribe? Gretel wouldn't do such a thing. Therefore, he entered a meditative state, and instead of rushing to communicate with Ms. Iluni, he unfolded his mental power and enveloped the ancient tree again. Then, slowly, sink into the spiritual ocean. In the consciousness, an emerald-colored world quietly descended. Emerald Dream, please answer my call. Forces of nature, please respond to me. Soothe this ancient tree, tolerate this ancient tree, heal its pain, and make it forget the long-standing pain. You have worked hard to help World Tree, sort out the violent energy of the Well of Eternity, and provide a stable and abundant energy environment for the elves. Get rid of the ancient trees first. First, the ancient tree was appeased and cured. Let it no longer have a tantrum all the time, no longer have to work all day long, it needs an elf. He threw himself into the ancient tree and sealed himself inside to meditate. This way, his mother, Lady Elune, could also take a breather. At least, I can leave the ancient tree temporarily and rest outside for a few days. Take a bath, eat a good meal, have a good sleep, the normal kind of sleep that lies on the bed, not the kind of sleep in the trunk of an ancient tree, God knows whether it is curled up or upright, and meditates instead of sleeping. Kind. Then, everyone finds a place to sit down and talk face to face. Communicating through words is always more convenient to hide something than communicating through mental communication, isn't it? The breeze is gentle and the branches and leaves are rustling. Greed held the oak staff, breathing evenly and steadily, and fell into deep meditation. The whole person's aura, consciousness, and even spiritual frequency are infinitely closer to nature and the ancient trees. Wow! Sirara took a step back, then another step, her eyes opening wider and wider. She quietly tugged on Ashu Edge beside her, and her voice was like a whisper. He is so quiet. If you close your eyes and perceive it directly with your mental power, you will think it is a small tree. It's like this when you're immersed in nature, Ashu Edge also replied in a low voice. The air flowed out between the lips and teeth, and every word was pronounced with a breathy sound, for fear of waking Greed. As she spoke, her eyes became more and more serious and dignified. She had seen Gretel in this situation before. Gretel had also entered such a state when he intercepted the level 18 Radiant Knight in the Isthmus of Vasco and called on the forest and the ancient trees to help him. However, Greet's mental fluctuations are now much wider and quieter than those then. It was so quiet that she was a little scared. The naturalist took a step back, then another. Standing on tiptoes, he retreated to a disciple of Elder Melancilla and whispered. Do you think we should ask the elders to come over? Are you worried too? The female elf blinked her green eyes, and saw the same nervousness in Ashu Edge's eyes. Someone agreed with his opinion, and Ashu Edge erected a sound barrier to wrap them both up, her voice trembling slightly. I'm really worried, he's immersed too deeply in nature, it's easy to completely integrate with nature and never come back, little Gretel, he didn't grow up on Evermeet Island. He has not received a complete elf education, and he is completely ignorant of many rules and taboos. Young nature walkers, especially novices, and novices with outstanding talents are especially prone to this situation. When resonating with nature, when calling on the power of nature, or when turning into an animal, you are immersed too deeply and too involved. Once this happens, it is easy to lose your mind and your body will become permanently wooden, or turn into a ball of water, a ball of fire, a breeze, or forget that you are an elf and live in the form of an animal. Therefore, when young elves first embark on the journey of nature walkers, they must be cared for by elders and wake up in time. As for little Gretel's current situation, something really went wrong, and no one at the scene could wake her up. The female elf nodded vigorously to Ashu Isang, turned into a blue-gray bird with long tail feathers, and flew up suddenly. She flexibly turned and turned in the woods, passing through the gaps between dense branches and leaves, and soon disappeared. About half a quarter of an hour later, a green light lit up on a nearby small tree. Elder Melancilla stepped out of the tree trunk and hurried over. "What's going on with little Greet? Let me see." Her steps seemed to be slow, but she took a few meters with one step, and several meters with one step. She reached Gretel in a few steps. The legendary elder stared at his brows closely, then closed his eyes slightly, feeling the fluctuations in his mental power. After a while, he breathed a long sigh of relief. "It's okay. It should be okay. Don't worry, I will keep an eye on him." It was only at this time that Sarala felt the crisis, staring at Elder Melancilla longingly, her little face wrinkled. The elder patted her forearm comfortingly and smiled softly at her. "It's okay, it's okay. This child's will is very strong. Although he is calling for nature, he still maintains his existence and does not scatter. Besides, I will keep an eye on him and won't let him get completely lost in nature." Sarala breathed a small sigh of relief, her shoulders still stiff, standing beside Elder Melancilla, refusing to leave even one step. A group of people stood from the shadow of the sun to the rising of the bright moon, and then from the rising of the bright moon to the zenith of the moon. Greet always held the oak staff and leaned against the roots of the ancient tree as if he was asleep. The only change was that the oak staff in his arms sprouted branches and leaves. The tree became taller and taller, and the branches and leaves became more and more dense, firmly covering Gretel's body. Unknowingly, from the top leaves of the oak tree to the trunk held by Greet, the whole thing was condensed with silver, just like the moonlight brought down by the ancient tree, which was completely concentrated on the little oak tree. It seems that the communication between Greet and the ancient tree went very smoothly. Elder Melancilla was delighted and said softly. Many of his communications use oak sticks as bridges. This can not only amplify his power, but also prevent him from being indulged in nature, a smart child. Then he's okay. It's okay. Not only is it okay, the oak staff should also have benefited a lot from the communication with the ancient tree, Elder Melancilla said with a smile on her lips and a relaxed tone. The aura of the ancient tree is becoming more and more peaceful. It should be, almost completed. As he was talking, a crack suddenly opened in the bark of the tree. The cracks get bigger and bigger, and the cracks get bigger and bigger, and finally, a ring-shaped arch is formed. Inside the arch, tree bark naturally hangs outward, forming a natural slide. A female elf in a simple white dress, her eyes closed, her hands hanging by her sides, her blonde hair wet on her forehead, was sent out of the tree trunk along the slide. Ms. Eluni. There was a crash, and a group of elves rushed up. They helped the blonde elf up and laid her down on the grass. Ms. Eluni Imagil, are you okay? Can you hear us? Your son, Gretel Nordmark, is here to see you. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Plague Blood Wolf 2 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @Uchiha Kantetsu for the 500 starting coin reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1267. Chapter 1264. Is this the child? Little Greet, what's wrong with you? 10,000 rewards plus 1 update. Eluni Imagil slowly opened her eyes. He opened it slightly and immediately closed it again, his whole body spinning. In a trance, it seems like you are still in the middle of the ancient tree. Let go of your spirit to connect with the ancient tree, listen to its voice, and soothe its pain. How many years has passed? 1 year, 10 years, or 10,000 years? Is she still in the dark trunk of the ancient tree? Floating in the heart of the tree, unfolding your mental power, without even needing to support your body except for meditation? No need to eat, no need to exercise, no need to expose to sunlight, no need to see, hear, smell, taste, and all senses, everything can be left to the ancient tree? The days have been like this for a long time, and even the passage of time has become insensible. A few warm hands supported her. Someone called her name in her ear. Iluni Imagil closed her eyes for a while, then slowly opened them. Thank God, it was night now, and the surroundings were pitch black, with only soft halo yellow spots floating in the distance, similar to the light she felt when she occasionally opened her eyes among the ancient trees. She half opened her eyes, allowing herself to adjust to the dim light around her, then turned to look to the side. There were 2 sentries, one male and one female. She had a vague impression that she had seen their faces when they occasionally left the ancient tree and came out to rest. Several young elves, all full of vitality, looked at her with concern, although she did not recognize them. A tall, silver-haired elf with a particularly stunning appearance stood outside the crowd, stretching his head to look at her from a distance. That look made Iluni want to ask, "Do we know each other?" His eyes continued to move, and a kind, gentle, and familiar face fell into his sight. Iluni was slightly startled, and quickly held onto the arm of the person next to her, trying to stand up. Elder Melancilla. It's actually a legend. He is a legendary elder. It was Elder Melancilla who specialized in healing and came to see her in person. However, she had been sealed in the ancient tree for so long that her arms, legs, and all the muscles in her body could no longer use their strength, and even her voice seemed dry and hoarse. After struggling for a moment, she fell back and fell into the arms of the person who was supporting her. Elder Melancilla patted her with a smile, took a thin-skinned fruit from the disciple's hand, and brought it to her lips. Don't worry, don't worry. You have stayed in the ancient tree for too long, and you need to get used to it. Come on, eat something first. The fruit had a refreshing fragrance, and just after smelling it, Iluni felt her stomach growl. She opened her lips and teeth slightly, holding the fruit in her mouth. With a slight tap of her teeth, the sweet juice slid into her mouth. After slowly drinking the juice in the fruit and then eating the pulp, Iluni finally felt that she had enough strength. Looking at the elder, he said softly, "Elder, what did you just say?" "Your son, Gretel Nordmark, has come to Evermeet Island to see you." Elder Melancilla carefully observed her expression, observing the changes in the muscles in her arms when she exerted force, and her hands had already condensed. A force of nature, ready to rescue at any time. Just now, he was communicating with and appeasing the ancient tree. Did you feel his spiritual power? Iluni Imagil's breathing suddenly became rapid. When she was among the ancient trees just now, it seemed that someone was actually calling her and saying her name. The communication of spiritual power seemed like a dark dream, but also seemed extremely real. Hello. I am Gretel Nordmark. He is a half-elf. Dear ancient tree, how are you? Where can I help you? Along with the spiritual power, there is an unusually quiet, tolerant, and broad power. Vast and boundless, only when he came into contact with her, there was a rare hesitation and wavering. Gretel Nordmark? Little Gretel? Her little Gretel? The child she gave birth to after all the hard work, the child she and her husband had been looking forward to, the child named after her husband's place of origin, the Great North, expecting him to become a great person. Watching him toddle, watching him babbling, planning his future advancement route, becoming a warrior, becoming a spellcaster, understanding nature, becoming a nature walker. When she left, she used her own blood to set a seal for him to hide his appearance, hoping that he could grow up safely and not be troubled in the crowd because of his distinctive features as a half-elf. When she felt something was wrong with her husband, she woke up from her meditation and begged her cousin to see him, take care of him, and protect him. She also begged her tribe members to prepare a large amount of supplies for him. "This child is here? Have you come to Yangju Island? My child? My son, little Gretel is here." A sudden surge of strength surged through her body. Iluni Imagil supported the arm of the person next to her and struggled to stand up, looking back at the ancient tree. A young half-elf leaned against an ancient tree. The black hair, the eyebrows, the contours of the face, and the close-to-nature aura were exactly the same as what she had traced in her heart countless times and what she had expected in meditation countless times. However, the child did not open her eyes to look at him, nor did he smile at her, talk to her, or call her mother affectionately and affectionately. Instead, he raised his head, held the oak staff in his arms, closed his eyes tightly, and remained silent. With just one glance, Iluni could feel his mental fluctuations, which were almost as quiet as the ancient trees. "Is it this child, little Gretel? Little Gretel, what's wrong with you?" Iluni pushed away the supporting arm beside her, held up her skirt, and ran towards the ancient tree. After running out for 2 steps, my feet went weak and I stumbled down to my knees. Several pairs of arms scrambled to hold her. "Iluni, don't worry." Elder Melancilla was closest to her, holding her firmly with one hand and gently brushing her with the other hand. Iluni felt her body light up, as if a warm wind enveloped her, making her half floating in the air. She could stand and walk effortlessly. "Elder, don't worry." Little Greet spent a lot of effort to appease the ancient tree in order to wake you up. At his age, it is not easy to communicate with the ancient tree to this point. Elder Melancilla supported the young junior and walked forward slowly, while speaking slowly to comfort her. "But I have been paying attention to his situation. Don't worry, he is fine. Give him a little time and he should be able to wake up." As he spoke, he walked forward, his light footsteps stepping on the grass, barely even bending the soft grass tips. The night breeze carrying the fragrance of grass and trees blew leisurely, and the elves around them were all concentrating and holding their breath. No one dared to disturb them at this time. This master who specializes in healing and plant communication has a power to soothe people when he speaks. Iluni half leaned on her, and her trembling body gradually calmed down. She was brought to Gretel and helped him sit on the ground. Iluni gently raised her hand, wanting to touch the child's cheek. She raised her hand halfway, but she didn't dare to get close, for fear of disturbing Greet's meditation. Elder Melancilla smiled slightly, leaned forward, and pressed his palm on the oak staff. The natural breath flows and he drinks softly. "Gretel, wake up." The breeze blew against my face, and the moonlight condensed on the ancient trees also caused slight ripples at this moment. Under the moonlight, her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and Greet opened her eyes blankly. His eyes wandered without focus for a while before his consciousness emerged from the vast and quiet emerald ocean and returned to reality. His eyes focused on the 2 women in front of him. Elder Melancilla still had that caring smiling face, looking at him kindly, and supporting a strange elf woman with her arm. And that elf woman has a beautiful face. She looks like she is only 23 or 4 years old. She has brilliant blonde hair and lake-like emerald green eyes. He had exactly the same blonde hair and blue eyes as when he concealed his human ancestry and only showed his elven ancestry. She was wearing an extremely simple white dress, which was loosely wrapped around her body. It was a little wet and she didn't even have time to change it. Leaning softly in Elder Melancilla's arms, with tears in her eyes, staring closely at herself, as if she had 1,000 words to say, but couldn't say a single word. One hand was slightly raised, as if she wanted to reach out to herself, but then retracted timidly. Even if she didn't retract, looking at her thin arms and obviously atrophied muscles, she probably didn't have much strength. Gretel's thoughts were racing. Subconsciously, he fumbled with his collar and pulled out a pendant, a light green drop-shaped pendant. It was neither gold nor jade, nor wood, nor stone. You could feel it just by holding it in your hand. To the vigorous life force. In an instant, the elf woman's eyes burst out with an extremely excited light, and 2 blushes rushed to her cheeks. His lips moved and he murmured, wanting to say something, but suddenly his body swayed and fell onto the elder, his eyes closed tightly. Gretel was in a panic for a while. Wanting to step forward for examination and treatment, I stretched out my hands forward, but didn't know what to do. I even forgot to throw out the electrocardiogram and blood pressure monitor. Seeing Elder Melancela hugging the elf woman, testing her breathing and pulse, condensing a group of natural power, gently waking her up, and feeding her another fruit to her mouth, greet Zasha holding both hands, he stood awkwardly. What's up with her? It's okay. I have been sealed in the ancient tree for a long time. I am too weak and excited. Elder Melancela breathed a sigh of relief, laid Eluni Imagil flat on the grass, and covered her with a cloak. Leave the ancient tree, rest for a while, eat and drink as you should, and you will be fine naturally. Little one, you have to believe in the power of nature. She smiled, stood up, took a few steps away, and returned to the elves standing far away. Greet knelt down next to the female elf, took several deep breaths, and then slowly leaned forward. He stretched out his hands, put a pale and cold hand in his palm, and called hesitantly. Mother. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Sika for the 10,000 starting coins. Thanks to @Brother Dowby for the 300 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1268. Chapter 1265. Mother, this is Sarala. Mother. Greet's call was slow and hesitant. To the people standing nearby, it sounded obviously harsh, as if everything from the throat to the tongue had been polished with sandpaper. No way. Gretel was not good at acting to begin with, but the word mother has mobilized all his acting talents from his previous life to this life. And to be honest, it was really difficult for him to call a female elf who looked about 23 or 4 years old and was younger than himself in terms of appearance. Fortunately, no one at the scene suspected it. Whether it was Elder Melancela, Illidan, or Ashu Isang, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, no matter what, little Gretel is still willing to recognize this family and his mother by blood. As for the harshness and so on, that's natural. For a child who left his mother before he could remember anything, you cannot expect him to be affectionate with his mother when he meets her for the first time as an adult. If you really want to be affectionate, everyone still has to worry about whether this child has ulterior motives. The current reaction is very normal, and can even be said to be quite good. The elves exchanged glances with each other and nodded gently, almost imperceptibly. Bernard and Sirara didn't think there was anything strange about Greet's reaction, and their 2 pairs of eyes stared directly at Greet's face. Bernard also picked up the human form of Appa and let him sit on his shoulders, concentrating and holding his breath, watching Gretel's every move. After Gretel called out mother, she gradually entered the role. Leaning forward slightly, he put Eluni's left palm in his hands with both hands, letting the body temperature soak in bit by bit. While warming her palms, she pressed gently, feeling the muscles in her palms that were so thin that they were atrophied. How long had she been lying in the middle of the old tree? 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. Patients who have been bedridden for a long time almost always have symptoms of muscle atrophy, and some are accompanied by other complications such as bedsores, accumulative pneumonia, and urinary tract infections. Of course, the seals of ancient trees have their own magical effects, and the power of nature also has a very good protective and supportive effect on the human body. When I followed Elder Fahim to treat seriously injured patients in the Elven secret realm, almost no elves who had been sealed for a long time developed bedsores and pneumonia. However, muscle atrophy is still unavoidable. Just like those astronauts working on the space station, who stay in a gravity-free environment for 1, 2, or 3 months. After returning, they will suffer from muscle atrophy, osteoporosis, and reduced bone density, and they need to recover slowly. Don't be anxious, don't get up in a hurry. Gretel clasped Ms. Eluni's palms with both hands, and gently added a little strength to make her feel his presence, with a soft voice. You have been sealed in the ancient tree for too long. You have just come out and your muscles have no strength. Lie down for a while and wait until you adapt to the outside environment. Then slowly sit up and lean on something. Don't worry, I'm here, I always. Eluni Imogil's eyelashes blinked gently, and it took a long time before they opened again. She struggled to raise her head to look at Greet, staring closely at the familiar yet unfamiliar face. In a moment, tears filled her eyes. Gretel. Her lips trembled slightly, she raised her palm and tried to touch the child's cheek. Greet quickly leaned down, held her wrists and arms, and let her fingers fall on his face. The cold and slender fingers traced the curve of the cheek like butterfly wings, and they left at the touch, as if there was something delicate and fragile under the fingertips. Little Gretel, my little Gretel. Even though deep down in his heart, he only regarded this woman as his original mother, it was still difficult for Gretel not to be moved by such an affectionate call. He quietly supported Eluni's arm and let her touch his cheek, staring into her eyes without moving. After a long time, Eluni retracted her arm, put her elbow on the ground, and tried to get up unsteadily. Greet quickly took a step closer, put his arm across her shoulders, and supported her to sit up. Not far away, Elder Melancilla stepped forward and pointed lightly. The soft weeds on the ground grew up, intertwined with themselves, and turned into a soft cushion. Gretel slowly placed Eluni on the cushion and helped her adjust her position so that she could lean back more comfortably. Then, he raised his head and smiled at the elder, took a fruit lifted by a vine, and brought it to Eluni's lips. Eat something first. You just came out of the ancient tree and your body is very weak. You need to eat something to recover. As for the ancient tree, you don't have to worry. I'm here to comfort you first. Eluni opened her lips reflexively and took a bite of the fruit. The juice gurgled into her mouth, and she seemed to feel nothing, her eyes still staying on Greet's face. It seems as if the beloved child will disappear in the blink of an eye. Only when he heard the word ancient tree, he turned over his hand and grabbed Greet's arm hard. Not knowing where the strength came from, the thin fingers dug deeply into Gretel's forearm. No need for you. After just saying these few words, 2 more blushes appeared on his cheeks, his breathing became rapid, and his whole body seemed to faint again. Elder Melancilla stepped to her side. Don't worry, we are here. Even if the ancient tree goes berserk again, I can calm it down without little Gretel rushing to the front. Eluni Imogil let out a long breath, relaxed her body, and slid down softly. Elder Melinthila winked at Gretel and held Eluni's wrist. Okay, you go and freshen up first, change your clothes, and then chat slowly with little Greet. Let's clean up ourselves first. We can't be unkempt in front of our son, right? As he spoke, a stream of warm air lifted Eluni up. Greet followed closely, holding Eluni's wrist, and followed until they reached the door of the cabin. He let go of his hand and patted the back of her hand gently. You go and freshen up first, and I have to tidy up as well. Don't worry, I'll be waiting at the door, and we'll have dinner together later. Eluni turned back step by step and was carried in by the female elf guarding the ancient tree. She didn't look back until the wooden door was closed. Greet let out a long sigh of relief and immediately grabbed Elder Melancilla. Is it okay for her to be like this? How long will it take for her to recover? Can't she just eat fruits? Is there anything else to eat? Is there any meat? Or fish? At least, there should be some shells or eggs, right? Fruits generally contain fructose, glucose, or carbohydrates. Some fruits, such as avocados, are rich in fat, but generally have less protein. It has been sealed in an ancient tree for so long and has not seen the light of day for a long time. It should at least be supplemented with enough protein, right? Without protein, how can muscles recover? And what about vitamins? What about minerals? If there is a large loss of bone calcium, vitamin D must be supplemented. Without vitamin D, the work efficiency of osteoblasts and osteoclasts will be greatly reduced, and they will be unable to produce new bone cells and bring calcium into the bones. And, most importantly, the issue of absorption. I have been bedridden for a long time and haven't eaten properly in years. Can I digest big fish and meat? He doesn't understand the nutritional care of long-term bedridden patients. In the past, in hospitals, specialist doctors were responsible for this, either the gastroenterology department or the nutrition department. Also, there are specialized enteral nutrition preparations that can help patients absorb to the maximum extent. The elves don't have such a thing, right? Is there anything similar? Don't worry, Elder Melancelo patted him funny. He raised his hand and saw that another male elf guarding the ancient tree had opened the wooden house next door and moved out a bunch of bottles, cans, wooden boxes and crates. For compatriots who have been meditating in ancient trees for a long time, we have a lot of experience in what we should eat and what we can eat. Look, there are long-term preparations in the tree house. Wait for her to come out and eat well for a while, and soon she will be ready. Can recover. She picked up a shining shell, gently opened a slit, and showed it to Gretel. This is a food powder made from a variety of shell meat, fish meat, and seaweed. Just one shell like this is enough for a day. He picked up another translucent round egg with a soft shell and shook it in his hand. This is the egg laid by the black demon ant queen. We sealed it as soon as it was laid. Open a hole and drink it directly, and you will gain strength immediately. Then I picked up a warm brown wooden bottle, uncorked it, and the aroma was fragrant. Food made from the pupae and bee milk of golden striped bees is rich in magic power and is an excellent supplement to physical and mental strength. Moreover, it can also be taken by elves who are extremely weak. Don't worry, with so much food, coupled with the magic circle and the power of nature, your mother will recover soon. Gretel let out a long breath. Thinking about it again, all of the seriously injured patients rescued from the ancient trees recovered well, which shows that the elves have rich experience in dealing with this situation. Well, it would be great if I could get a batch of the formulas and production methods of these nutritional products. It would be best if I could also get some samples and go back and do some analysis and research. Thoughts were racing through his mind. He took 2 steps back, straightened his clothes, and applied a cleansing technique all over his body. He looked around, summoned a water mirror, raised his fingers and raked his hair a few times. Elder Melancelo watched him clean up himself with a smile without saying a word. Alas, boys are boys, and they are half-elf boys who grew up among humans. If it were another girl, she would have to take out a comb no matter what, and combing it by hand would be too rough. Of course, it is a mother's right to order her son to be more refined, and she cannot overstep her authority. Elder Melinthila quietly retreated into the crowd. Not long after, the wooden house opened with a creak, and the female sentry supported Eluni Imagiel, who had freshly washed herself and changed into an exquisite long dress, and slowly walked out of the door. Gretel hurried forward to meet him. As soon as his eyes met, he suddenly didn't know what to say and stood there blankly. Seeing Eluni walking up to him, her lips moving as if she had countless questions to ask, Gretel suddenly took 2 steps back in panic and stood next to an elf girl. Mother, this is Cyrilla. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Etzus for the 800 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1269. Cirilla. 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 In an instant, the eyes of all the elves who were accompanying Eluni, standing next to Gretel, and standing on both sides of Elder Melinthila in a semi-arc, focused on Cirilla. Eluni Imogil opened her eyes slightly, staring at her son with some confusion. For a moment, his eyes moved down from Gretel, to the intertwined hands of Gretel and Cirilla, and then up to Cirilla's face. Then, his eyes moved and fell on Appa, who was sitting on Bernard's shoulder on the other side of Gretel. His eyes narrowed, his throat gurgled twice, and he fainted again. Gretel. Not what you think. I can explain it. The chicken is flying and the dog is jumping, the chicken is flying and the dog is jumping. After struggling for a long time, a group of people sat down to eat. On the long table, what was placed in front of Eluni were the same foods given by Elder Melinthila, specially prepared for the elves who had been sealed in the ancient tree for a long time. Beside her, Greet had a plate of snow-white fish in front of her, a dish that had just been delivered by the wave of seafood a few days ago. Next to the fish, a plate of fresh vegetables exudes a refreshing aroma. The only problem is that it is all cold salad. As for Cirilla, there was no shortage of fish, shrimps, crabs, shells, snail meat, and bright red stewed venison. The silver dragon girl has a fork in one hand and a spoon in the other. Her movements are not fast, but the food in front of her goes down as fast as anyone else. Bernard and Appa, on the other hand, each held a clay pot over a foot high, filled to the brim with the aroma of meat. Bernard sat at the table, lowered his chin, and his face could directly touch the mouth of the clay pot, and he could eat happily without much effort. As for Appa, he is so small that his shoulders are not as long as a clay pot when he is sitting there, but he eats no slower than Bernard. Zillaolu, holding a spoon that was almost bigger than the face in one hand, half of the stew in the clay pot was gone in just a few mouthfuls. Eluni took small bites and ate slowly. Take 2 bites and look at Gretel, take another 2 bites and look at Cirilla. The color rose little by little on the pale cheeks, and there were many smiles in his eyes. The natural magic of elves is indeed magical. After finishing the meal, Gretel watched helplessly as Eluni's face looked much better and her skin seemed moisturized. After eating, I actually had the strength to be supported by Greet and walked a few steps under the tree. My child, how have you been in these years? I'm sorry, Mom couldn't grow up with you, Mom, I didn't visit you. I'm fine. Greet held the back of her hand with her back hand. He took a deep breath and said slowly. I'm living a good life, my father treats me very well. He teaches me how to read and practice martial arts. He taught me everything he can, by the way, there has never been another woman by his side. After my father passed away, his comrades have always taken care of me and protected me, until I joined the city guards as an adult, and later awakened the power of nature. I was introduced to the Master Tower to study, and was accepted as a disciple by the elder of the local nature religion. Later, I went to Nevis. He spoke leisurely, trying his best to avoid the important things and avoid mentioning the experiences of his original body before he traveled through time. Eluni listened attentively and suddenly asked. Where's Fanu? I asked him to take care of you when I felt your father passed away. Where did he go? From Greet's narration, she heard no trace of her cousin's existence at all. Where did her cousin go? Why should her son, who was still young and unable to stand on his own, struggle alone and live under the care of his father's comrades after leaving his mother and losing his father? Fanu. Gretel hesitated for a moment, whether to tell her directly or let the unreliable cheap cousin come out and confess. Eluni glanced at the bonfires outside the wooden house from the end of the long table, and suddenly raised her voice. Fanu. I don't know what kind of magic was used to assist this sound. The sound was high and sharp. Gretel trembled subconsciously and glanced at the juice in the glass in front of him. This glass won't be shattered, right? Thank God the glass didn't shatter. However, inside the glass, the clear, transparent, sweet-smelling light green juice clearly rippled. It suddenly became quiet outside the cabin. The sounds of conversation, laughter, and clinking of glasses suddenly disappeared without a trace. In the sound of the mountain wind blowing through the leaves and the crackling of the campfire, an invisible pressure quietly accumulates. Tick-tock. 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 Gretel held his breath and quietly leaned back. His cheap cousin had a conversation with him before, and after handing over the items, Gretel never held the other party accountable. For one thing, after all, the patient was using the method given by Greet. The patient who had just been cured was regarded as half of Greet's patient. It was not in line with Greet's professional ethics to lift the patient from the bed and beat him. Besides, Gretel is considered a junior in terms of seniority. It's okay to just ignore it with a cold face, but if you really want to pursue something, it doesn't feel right. However, it would be most appropriate for Eluni to pursue the matter herself. Come on, hit that guy all over his head. If you don't have the energy and can't move, I can do it for you. Or, if my seniority is not suitable, anyone here who has been treated by me can do it for me. Eluni's two slender eyebrows were slowly raised. After changing her cordial, gentle, hopeful, and cautious attitude when talking to Greet, she sneered and raised her voice again. Where's Fanu? Stop hiding. I saw you. Sister Eluni. A head slowly poked its head out of the wooden door. Looking at Gretel and others, and then at Eluni, his handsome face suddenly fell down, and he was so bitter that he could drip out green juice. Sister Eluni, I was wrong, don't be angry, just hit me and scold me. You just came out of the ancient tree and are weak. Don't be angry. When I was passing by the fertile forest, I heard that something happened to the teacher, and I wanted to save him. I thought everything would be fine with the protective equipment on my body. I really didn't mean it. Ouch. A tree vine stretched out of thin air, wrapped around his ankle, and dragged him directly out of the cabin. Gretel put down his knife and fork and ran out to take a look. He saw that his unlucky cousin had been hung upside down on the tree, dangling and howling. I really didn't mean it. I know I was wrong. Sister Eluni, I'm sorry. Little Greet, I'm sorry. Spare me, ah. It hurt so much. Another green vine hung from the branches of the ancient tree, and it was aimed at him and whipped hard. Stop, swing back again, and again. Under the ancient tree, Fanu's screams and wails continued and echoed for a long time. Beside the bonfire, the elves gathered together to eat, drink and chat, looking up and pointing. They were whispering and laughing, but no one, including Elder Melancilla, tried to let him down. Even the two sentries guarding the wooden house were held back by others. The breeze blew by, and Gretel heard someone whisper. It's all his fault, he ran into dangerous situations without authorization on the road, and fell asleep for so many years. Once he was injured, the child was left without a father or a mother, and he was left alone for so many years. Gretel shrank his neck and quickly returned to the cabin. Well, it seems that the original mother has no temper at all. She is quite ruthless when it comes to beating people up. She also doesn't know how her original father got along with her. Greet shook his head hard to get rid of these messy thoughts and sat back at the table. From the moment he came in, Eluni's eyes were fixed on him, never leaving him. Watching him sit down, he sighed softly. I'm sorry, kid. It's all your mother's fault. She didn't find a reliable person to take care of you. After Fanu passed away, there was no news and she didn't ask others to find out. It must have been very hard these years. It's all over. Greet patted the back of her hand comfortingly. You have tried your best to take care of me. It is not your fault that you did not ask others to inquire after you. These years, meditating in the ancient trees and appeasing the ancient trees have exhausted your energy, right? You don't have to do this anymore. I will help you. Don't. Eluni was startled. She immediately held Gretel's palm with her backhand. Her fingers, which had just warmed up a little but were still cold, tightly wrapped around Gretel's fingers. Don't get stuck. I am the daughter of the gemstone flower family. It is my responsibility to appease the ancient tree, not yours. You have your great future, so don't spend your whole life buried in the ancient tree. The long words were spoken in a short and sincere tone, and upon hearing this, Gretel felt a warmth surge in his heart. He gently broke away from Ms. Eluni's hand and held it back. It's okay. I'll just take some time to try. It won't take me a lifetime to do this. I have no shortage of time. You see, I am already a level 13 magician, a level 13 nature priest, still a level 5 level knight. This last sentence was said with a bit of guilt. Probably, a level 5 knight, right? After breaking through the knights, you won't go back, right? After all, he has been nourished by the power of nature and the gifts of the world in the past 2 years. His physical body should still be strengthening, but he just didn't use the knight's method to train. Eluni's eyes became brighter and brighter as she listened, and the corners of her lips became higher and higher. She looked at Gretel up and down with new eyes, full of joy. Not bad, a level 13 caster has already caught up with me. I have been meditating in the ancient tree and advanced with the help of the ancient tree. You can actually catch up with me. You are worthy of being a child of the gemstone flower family. By the way, this Miss Sarah. Greet straightened his back. Opposite me, Cyrilla also sat upright in an instant, opened her mouth to speak, and then swallowed it back. Eluni had let go of Gretel's hand and stood up in a hurry. Wait a minute. Mom has something to give you. It flashed like a butterfly, turned into the inner room, and disappeared. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Xianqiu for the non-reward 10,000 starting coins. Thanks to @Scarlacy for the 1,500 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1270. The cabins near the old tree look small and exquisite, 3 of them side by side. It is only 1 floor high and 1 room wide. Even the depth is only 1 inside and 1 outside. The 2 sentinels each had a hut, and the one among them belonged to Elun Amargil and had not been opened for many years. When Gretel walked through the door for the first time, even the door handle was covered with a thick layer of dust. But, I don't know how much space power is attached to these 3 cabins. Gretel and others sat down to eat. The long table was placed outside. With people walking around and serving food, there was still plenty of space. And Eluni ducked in, closed the thin wooden door, and didn't come out for a long time. A small inner room has the functions of a bedroom and a bathroom, and it also needs to be able to hide things. God knows how much it has expanded. Gretel secretly suspected that all of Ms. Eluni's personal belongings were probably moved here. Also, if it were him who wanted to be sealed in the ancient tree and meditate for a long time, it would be equivalent to becoming independent, separating from the family, and having a long-term job here. Even if the house is divided, why don't you move all the things here? This small wooden door has extremely good sound insulation, so you can't hear the sound of footsteps or turning things over. Greet listened curiously to the screams outside for a while, then poured a glass of juice for Cyrilla. Hey, Sarah, is there anything you want to play or see on Evermeet Island during this time? Whatever. Sarah grabbed the glass and drank it in one gulp, smiling broadly. The fruits and juices on Yeongju Island are sweet and sour, with a special umami flavor. Even though she usually loves to eat meat, she can't stop eating them. After finishing a large plate of barbecue or a bowl of stew, drink a large sip of juice to rinse your mouth. It is very refreshing and comfortable. Is there any scenic spot on Yeongju Island? Is there a hot spring? I haven't been in a hot spring for a long time. By the way, Gretel, can this world tree be climbed? I have never seen such a tall tree. Okay. I want to climb to the top of the tree and have a look. This. Gretel opened his mouth, not knowing how to answer for a moment. The world tree, this world tree. It is not a big tree growing in the wild, or a magic plant. As long as you communicate with it well, it likes you, or it cannot defeat you, it will allow you to climb to the top. It supports the entire Elf King's court. To be more serious, it is the holy tree of the elf, and may even be the belief of the elf. Can you climb such a tree if you want? By the way, when I was fighting World of Warcraft in my previous life, I seemed to have a mission, which was to jump down from the top of the elves' world tree. Cyrilla won't fall in love with this mission, right? You won't climb once, jump once, and want to jump a second, third, or fourth time, right? As for the scenery, I'll go back and ask Gideon, or other people, to see if there are any interesting places to take you to. There must be hot springs, there are volcanoes here, and if there are volcanoes, there should be hot springs. As for climbing trees. He turned and looked outside the house. It may take a while. When we solve the problem of the Well of Eternity, we can go back to see World Tree and the Elders. If World Tree likes us, probably, maybe, we are willing to let you climb to the top. Bar. Cyrilla made a vague hum, lowered her head, and continued eating. Greet looked at Bernard again. The barbarian raised his head from the clay pot and said in a deep voice. Boss, is there a place to fight here on Yeongju Island? If it's convenient, can you arrange for me to go to the battlefield to practice? He raised his left fist, clenched it hard, and the muscles of his forearm and upper arm flexed. I have already advanced to level 11, but I haven't fought yet. I always feel that the advancement is slow. I have to go to the battlefield and have a hard fight to sharpen my strength so that I can protect you, boss. I'm afraid I can't keep up with you. It's not that I can't keep up anymore. Bernard knew clearly, he was at level 7 when he got to his boss, and the boss was a level 1 mage. At that time, he still relied on his own protection. But now, the boss is already a level 13 mage, and he has just advanced to level 11. The resources, opportunities, and training during the advancement process were all given by the boss. If this continues, I will be unable to do anything but hold myself back. And relying on the little friendship in the past, becoming a drag on the team and letting the boss keep it in vain? Barbarians can't stand this. In the wilderness, there are no barbarians who get something for nothing. That kind of person will be despised by the entire ethnic group, and will be ridiculed even if he dies, and future generations will not be able to hold their heads high. Gretel's face was serious, and he neither shook his head nor could nod. He didn't want Bernard to get hurt, but he also knew that this was the only way for a warrior to grow. After struggling for a long time, he turned his attention to APA. The white-haired boy wiped a handful of sauce from his mouth and smiled brightly at him. Boss, let me go with Bernard. I have to train hard to improve my strength. By the way, can Shiloh arrange a good place to prevent her from going to the battlefield? Gretel finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thank God, there is finally no one who is not going to the battlefield, even Shiloh. What, going to the battlefield? The door to the inner room of the cabin creaked open. Iluni stood at the door holding a wooden plate, looking at this and that, her eyes surprised and worried. "Are you going to the battlefield? Little Gretel, are you going too?" "I don't go." Gretel jumped up, shaking his hands wildly. Eluni was visibly relieved. "That's good. Wait, Mom will find you a few more things." After saying that, he turned around and went in again. Not long after, a group of vines, or a group of tumbleweed-like plants rushed out from beside him. Putting down the tray in his hand, he picked up a simple small wooden box and gently pushed it in front of Sirira. "These are some gadgets I collected before. They're not worth much, just take them and play with them." Without waiting for Sirila to refuse, she opened the lid of the box, and suddenly a stream of light illuminated the long table. Eluni picked up a bracelet, a pearl chain that could wrap around her wrist 3 times, dotted with colorful flowers made from shells and corals. Then I picked up a necklace, colorful, half-open and blooming flowers were solidified into magic gems, large and small, strung together into long chains. Next is a brooch, with snow-white feathers shining with a moving magical luster, set on a brilliant sapphire. Woven with the finest green silk, a translucent gauze scarf embroidered with countless flowers. They are all things that young girls will like. They are things that a young elf collected bit by bit and made bit by bit during his long leisurely years. As Eluni said, they are not worth anything, or in other words, they are all local products on Everlasting Island, and they are not the kind of treasures that have powerful magical power, are extremely rare and precious, and are priceless when taken outside. However, it is all her hard work over the years, embodying the hard work and love of her entire girlhood. Cyrilla's eyes became brighter and brighter. She also likes these things, every one of them. Every one of the Dragon Clan's treasures is shiny and full of magic power, and can be directly exchanged for combat power when taken out. But in terms of delicacy and beauty, these things that Eluni took out are enough to knock them off countless mountain peaks. However, even though she liked it, she never took it. The Silver Dragon girl folded her hands on the table, clasping them tightly, and looked at Greed hesitantly. "Are these, for me? Can I take them? This box is full of ornaments, each piece is a piece of time, a memory, and a priceless treasure of the owner. Just give it to her. What will Eluni do after giving it to her?" "Take it." Eluni closed the wooden box and forced it into her hand. "Looking up and down, the more I look at it, the more satisfied I am. A beautiful silver dragon girl. A silver dragon girl who is considerate of her thoughts, and cherishes her hard work. A silver dragon girl who has been following her son, helping him, and protecting him since he had not reached level 5, and followed him all the way to this place. He is worthy of being her son. He is truly blessed. Where can he find such a good girl? I collected these when I was a teenager. After I got married and had little Gretel, I stopped playing for a long time. Now I focus on appeasing the ancient tree, and I don't have time to take care of these. If you like it, that's the best." Gretel sighed softly. This box full of toys is not even as valuable as a 4 or 5 ring magic item, but its meaning is extremely heavy. He stood up and walked around Eluni, stood next to Cyrilla, and solemnly pressed the back of her hand. "Take it. Collect it well. If you like it, take it out and play with it often. Then it will be worthy of your love." Cyrilla was overjoyed, took the wooden box, and put on the flower necklace on the spot. Eluni smiled with satisfaction, turned back to the vine, and led the vine towards Bernard. "I originally prepared this for little Gretel." She commanded the vine ball to split from it and spit out a large box. "His father is on the path of a knight. I don't know if he will become a knight. I also prepared a pair of wrist guards for him, to increase endurance and strength, a belt to increase defense, and a pair of protective guards. Ankles can strengthen your connection with the earth." One by one, she took out the equipment woven with plant silk threads or embroidered with leather and magic silver thread from the big box, and placed them in front of the barbarians. He took a step back and looked him up and down. There is also a set of armor that does not suit your body shape. I will ask someone to modify it. Thank you for protecting my son all these years. The blonde elf lady bowed solemnly and thanked her son's followers. Bernard was in a hurry and quickly returned the gift. Eluni smiled and patted his forearm, then took out a headband inlaid with a green tree heart and gave it to Appa to increase his mental power and improve his defense against psychic shock. Finally, he turned around and looked Greet up and down. You've grown so big in a blink of an eye, you can barely use the things Mom prepared for you. What else can I give you? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Scarlacy for the 100 starting coins. Thanks to @Lizixiaaju and @Chiufenyang for the 100 starting coins. Buy a new book. Girl, don't be impatient. I am a town transport envoy from the town transport department. What am I doing, you ask? I'm helping the old lady cross the road. Why do this? Because the system said I wouldn't survive 3 days. Oh yes, one more thing. I discovered that my house actually has a tunnel leading directly to the next door. Then a princess moved next door to me. New author and new author, multiple female protagonists, the writing style is light and humorous, very comfortable to read, and a little sweet. If you are interested, you should not miss it. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1271. Eluni Imagil wanted to give all her collection and all her wealth to her son. What's the use of keeping these things if she doesn't give them to her son? In the past 10 years, she has been meditating in the ancient trees almost day and night, neither attending parties nor dancing in the moonlight. Her duty is to appease the ancient trees, not to patrol or go to the battlefield, or even to plant herbs. This wealth is still there, and there is no other use for it other than leaving it to gather dust. However, Eluni looked through her collection and couldn't find anything suitable. She is not without wealth. As the daughter of the Gemflower family, she received a pretty generous share from the family and from her mother. As an 11th level nature walker, now a 13th level nature walker, with the important task of appeasing the ancient tree, it is absolutely impossible for the elves to treat her badly. Even if she doesn't use it, her share is hers every month, every week. It will also be delivered on time. However, most of the wealth that the daughter of the Gemstone Flower family received from the family was real estate. A woodland rich in the power of nature, a spring flowing with moonlight. There are many old trees that have grown for hundreds of years and can be transformed into tree beings, and a meadow that blooms every year and can be made into healing herbs. A group of wild deer live in this woodland, drink water from the spring, and once injured, go to the grass to eat grass to heal themselves. She would rather give all of these real estate properties to Greet. However, this child is destined to belong to the whole world. Eluni didn't think that Everlasting Island would keep his footsteps. And among the chattels she has on hand, more than half are things that only girls can use. Beautiful silk, beautiful gemstones, beautiful jewelry. These things were all given to Greet. What seemed wrong? Then there are the rewards she received from the tribe for performing the task of appeasing the ancient tree. However, she herself is a level 13 nature walker, and the shares she received are all materials suitable for her level. Magic crystals, tree sap, dried flowers and seeds, medicinal powders, spiritual potions. Greet is also level 13. He is so much younger than her. He is only in his 20s and is already level 13. It can be expected that Gretel will be able to break through to level 14, level 15, or even more in the next 1, 2, 3 or 5 years. The speed at which she advanced could never catch up with this child's pace. And these materials are suitable for level 13 nature walkers, potions used to restore mental power, powders used to outline scrolls and magic circles, crystals, leather and metals used to make equipment. Soon, before long, he won't be able to use it anymore. Little Gretel, I'm sorry, there aren't many things in Mother's hands that are suitable for you now, just wait a day or two. She wanted to say, I'll go find the elders, find the Magic Academy, and exchange these supplies for things of level 15 or even higher. She wanted to say, I will find some elders who are good at making magic equipment and customize a set of high-end equipment for you. She wanted to say that if I gather all the supplies in my hand, I can still buy some good things. However, greed had already held the back of her hand. Smiling, looking into the green eyes of the blonde elf, he spoke softly. I have received everything you gave me. Really, those clothes, shoes, equipment, magic books, all of them, the thoughts in them, I have received them all, and there is nothing more precious than them something. Eluni stood there in a daze, watching Gretel take out the small clothes, small shoes, and magic books one by one from the space pocket, and put them on the table one by one. Tears gradually filled her eyes. No matter what, her child still received these things she carefully prepared, and her child felt her heart. As soon as she heard the sentence, she struggled out of the tree, collected supplies, ran around begging for help, and tried her best from day to night to sew clothes for him and copy spell books for him. All that anxiety, all that hard work, all those favors, everything was not in vain, not at all. Greed caressed those small clothes and shoes, and then put them back into her pocket. Turning over his hands, he took out another pile of things and piled them on the table. Logically speaking, now that I have grown up, it's time for me to honor you. I just came in a hurry and didn't prepare anything good. He gently shook out a colorful, delicate, and soft shawl with red, white, yellow, black and brown arranged in an orderly manner, and took Eluni's fingers to caress it. I got these shawls in the Kingdom of the Sun. Although they don't have much magical power, they are woven by their best weavers. They are specially used by gods and kings. They are barely a novelty. These pieces of skin are the gifts I received for treating the local indigenous people in the rich forest. It's windy on the top of the mountain, so you can make a cloak. These fangs and horns are all thank you gifts for treating the monsters. They are not expensive things, they are better than fresh. And this wreath. The corners of Eluni's mouth kept turning up, but the tears couldn't stop rolling down. She held down Greet's hand that continued to take things, grabbed the shawl with her other hand, and stuffed it into his arms. You kid, why are you giving these things to me? Mom doesn't need anything, for such a grown-up person. If you get something good, you should give it to the girl you like. Cyrilla turned her face away silently and said nothing. Although his face was turned towards the door of the room, his ears still quietly perked up, listening to Gretel insisting on arguing with Eluni. These are all for you. Just accept them. Don't worry, accept them. Cyrilla has her share, she has all these things. There is no shortage of any of them. Whatever I earn, I have my share, it's her share. Of course. Not only does Greet have mine, but sometimes, Greet's share is directly attributed to my name. Cyrilla moved the tips of her ears happily. If it were not in human form and had no tail, it might even stand up and wag its tail. After a long period of arguing and pushing back and forth, Gretel finally convinced Eluni half-forcedly. Seeing her accepting the pile of gifts and moving them into the inner room one by one, Greet stood up to say goodbye. In an instant, Eluni's expression changed from moved and satisfied to panic. Are you leaving now? Where is it? Gretel didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He raised his arms and waved in a circle. I just went out to find a place to sleep. Your wooden house is only so big, so I don't necessarily have to squeeze in with you. There are also Cyrilla, Bernard, and Appa. I have to make arrangements for them. Eluni's face was full of reluctance. However, for such a big boy, it was really hard to keep him sleeping next to him, so I had to follow him out of the house step by step. Outside the wooden house, most of the bonfire has been extinguished, and the elves in twos and threes have begun to look for accommodation. But no one was sleeping, there was such a big lump hanging above the head, and it was still screaming, and no one could fall asleep without setting up a soundproof spell. Of course, with the physique of the elves, they actually only need 4 hours of sleep a day. Besides, after just returning to the World Tree and hearing such a big piece of gossip, everyone was a little excited and didn't want to sleep much. "Have you talked to your son? Do you feel better?" Elder Melancilla was the first to come forward and smiled at Eluni. Not far behind her, Elder Galat also rushed over at some point, but he didn't even look at his grandnephew. He just smiled and nodded in greeting from a distance. There were still tears on Eluni's cheeks, but her expression was much brighter. She smiled and bowed to Elder Melancilla. He looked at Elder Galat again, paused, and looked up at Fanu. "Hey, don't put him down." Before she could communicate with the ancient tree to let him go, Elder Galat quickly reached out to stop him. He pointed upward, and a stream of air swept through it. The sound above was immediately silenced, and the sound of the wind blowing through the trees and vines was no longer audible. After finishing processing, the legendary elder looked at Eluni and smiled apologetically. "I'm so sorry. It's because our family raised this brainless boy that your trust failed. This boy should be allowed to hang on the tree for a few more days to improve his memory." Eluni pursed her lips and said nothing, but turned to look at Gretel, seeking his opinion with her eyes. Elder Galat said quickly. "And little Gretel has also been wronged. I have already communicated with the family about the Amistasha family's compensation. Compensation is not necessary. Compensate it with my mother." Elun and Gretel answered at the same time. Elder Galat's heart sank and he smiled awkwardly. Too bad, the little guy is still angry, or maybe a little vindictive. Not accepting compensation means drawing a line or not responding at all. It seems that simply slapping Fanu is not enough to calm him down. What else did he want to say, but Greet turned to Elder Melancilla and bowed slightly. "Please take care of my mother's health. Don't worry, we have a mature plan for every elf that comes out of the ancient tree, and I will personally pay attention to it." Elder Melancilla nodded immediately. Gretel raised a smile and gently shook Ms. Eluni's hand. "Okay, mother. The night is quiet and the wind is cool, and your body is weak, so you should go back and rest quickly. Don't worry, I will still be here when you wake up tomorrow morning." Eluni returned to the cabin 3 times and closed the door. Greet breathed a sigh of relief, took 2 steps away, and summoned the mage's hut. Just as he was about to go in, Elder Melancilla took a step forward and turned to Gretel. "Little Gretel, what are you going to do next? Is there anything you particularly want to do or somewhere you particularly want to go? As long as I can arrange it for you." With a creak, the door of the cabin opened another crack, revealing a pair of bright and concerned eyes. "Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Chaos Monk for the 100 starting coins reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1272. Under the old trees and in front of the wooden house, the moonlight flows quietly. Gretel looked around. Elder Galat smiled slightly, but the lines of his cheeks and the corners of his eyes were a little tense, trying to hide his nervousness. Ashmoonsong sat up from the campfire, holding the blanket with one hand, stretching her neck and looking here. Although Idian did not get up, he secretly opened one eye. Make eye contact with him and immediately close your eyes as if nothing had happened. As for Bernard, the barbarian carefully put his hands behind his back, and the sound of clenching his fists could not be stopped. Gretel couldn't help but smile. He took a half step to the side, looked into Ms. Eluni's eyes through the crack in the door, and said softly, "Don't worry. I won't go anywhere until you recover." In the crack of the door, the pair of green eyes blinked, seeming to retreat into the darkness in panic. Greed turned to look back at Elder Melancilla with a relaxed tone. "When I come to Yangju Island, I still have some things I want to do and study. But before that, I want to walk around with Sarala and go to some fun and beautiful places. Is there any place I can go to? Introduce." Of course, Elder Melancilla breathed a sigh of relief. There are people who want to study it and want to play around with Sarala, which means that Gretel has a good impression of Evermeet Island anyway. Since I have a good impression, I hope to keep him for one more year, and one more year. Even if he can't stay for a long time, at least it can help him develop more recognition for the elves. As for places to play, there are so many. Standing on the top of Silver Peak, you can overlook the lake surrounded by mountains. The rainbow bridge spanning the Twin Islands is worth a walk. Wangting's World Tree, you should go and see it no matter what. A series of beautiful scenery came to my lips. However, in the end, Elder Melancilla just smiled. There are so many places to play and beautiful scenery on Yangju Island. In spring, summer, autumn, and winter, you can play for a whole year and you won't be able to see the entire scenery of Yangju Island. If you are interested, I will send a disciple to guide you later. The green eyes in the wooden house came closer. Gretel smiled. "Let's talk about it. It's very late, and I haven't finished my meditation today. I'll leave it to you to help my mother recover in the next few days." He bowed slightly and entered the mage's cabin with Sarala and others. As for the lump still hanging on his head, who cares? If you have the ability to rush into the secret realm of the elves, even with the help of protective magic equipment, you must be above level 10. From level 10 onwards, whether you are a warrior or a spellcaster, if you hang upside down on an ancient tree for several days or nights, no one will be killed. Besides, it seems that when he was chatting with Elder Melancilla, the vine that had been whipping had quietly retracted, right? Fanu hung on the tree for 7 days and 7 nights. It's not exactly hanging upside down. If you really can't stand it anymore, you can still do some abdominal curls and grab a vine to rest for a while. The elves who gathered under the ancient tree gradually dispersed from the next morning. Those who should help appease the ancient trees should help appease the ancient trees. Those who should support the battlefield should support the battlefield. Those who want to take advantage of this rare vacation to visit relatives and friends, especially the elves who have lived in the elf forest for a long time or have been seriously injured and sealed in ancient trees for dozens or hundreds of years, should seize the time to visit relatives and friends. In addition to Ashu Isong staying by the ancient tree, walking around with Sarala, practicing with Bernard, and teaching Appa some elf magic skills, even Idian ran away to unknown places. It is said that he is preparing to advance to the legend. Only Gretel lived by the wooden house under the tree for 7 days and 7 nights. Walk every day, meditate, talk to Lady Elune, and watch Elder Melinthera's disciples heal her. Seeing her skinny cheeks gradually plumping up, her atrophied muscles seemed to be getting fuller and fuller day by day, as if they had undergone filling surgery. Greed was a little worried and scanned it over and over with B ultrasound, and found that it was indeed muscle, not fat. Then he asked Ms. Eluni for a drop of blood, and ran to Elder Fahim to let the ancient tree taste it to make sure that the blood indicators were all normal. And an elf who is fully healthy and can swing a moon blade to kill 7 in and 7 out, without any. In terms of rapid recovery, elves' accumulation of nutrition and magic skills really surpass humans by a lot. Greed followed up, checked, and took notes. The type and weight of each food, the pattern of each magic circle, and the casting time were all carefully noted down. He wanted to do the experiment again. and every time he checked and recorded, Ms. Eluni watched with a smile. She stretched out her hand when asked, rolled up her trouser legs when asked, and stretched out her finger generously for him to poke if she wanted a drop of blood. After Greet finished the examination, she hummed songs, cooked for him, collected dew to make juice, pulled silk from leaves and grass stems, and sewed clothes for him. Day after day, he was as busy as a spinning top, but his deep green eyes were getting brighter and brighter. Greet could only see the longing and sadness that she had no time to hide when she looked up occasionally during her focused research. Greet knew without asking that Eluni, like every mother, hopes that her child will always be on her lap, safe and happy, and can be seen every day. However, like every mother, she knew that one day her children would spread their wings and fly high, and one day they would leave her and go to a very, very far away place. Gretel was also very helpless about this. After all, he is not Eluni's real son. All he can do is try his best to leave a warm memory for his original mother while he is staying on Evergem Island. On the night of the 7th day, Greet finished everything and leaned under the ancient tree to meditate for the day. Just as he adjusted his condition and prepared to sink into meditation, a scream suddenly came from above his head. Gretel suddenly looked up and saw the silver ancient tree waving its branches like crazy. Fanu hanging on it was spun like a windmill, shouting at the top of his lungs and almost hitting the tree trunk several times. "Put him down." Greet was startled and immediately pressed his hands on the ancient tree and shouted loudly. The ancient tree showed no response and was still struggling to swing its branches. Gretel gritted his teeth, turned around and hugged the trunk of the tree, pressing his forehead hard against it. "Don't be like this, don't be like this, calm down." The moment his consciousness connected with the ancient tree, Greet let out a dull groan, biting his lower lip with his teeth so that blood flowed out. In the sea of consciousness, a burning, hot wave surged up, and the whole person felt as if he was standing in a fire. No, not himself, but the ancient tree. Every root and stem of the ancient tree was inserted into the fire, and the flames rushed up and down the trunk. Elves, what did you do to the well of eternity? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of new book from a friend. I was Hermione's puppy at Hogwarts. Dumbledore, Laval, you should know the consequences of getting into trouble, right? Laval Grindelwald, Laval is just a little wolf, Laval doesn't know. This is the story of a little wolf cub who was raised by Dumbledore, but whose surname was Grindelwald, and who signed a contract with Hermione. It was the last forbidden wolf in the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts. Although his body is in the shape of a wolf, his intelligence is no less than that of a human. What will happen if such a little wolf inadvertently turns into a human shape? What changes will it bring to the magical world? Laval Grindelwald, Malfoy, please listen carefully. My father is the first Dark Lord, and my mother is the strongest White Wizard. The headmaster of Gryffindor College and I have caught mice together. I can be a leader among other professors going to the toilet in my arms. You mean Snape? He is my shit sweeper. Are you comparing my background with me? Professors, FCK. Laval Grindelwald, Hermione save me. Cat invested immediately. Earned more than 300 starting coins. Happy. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1273. While Gretel was deep in meditation, the movement of the ancient tree had already alarmed everyone in the wooden house. Eluni Imogil rushed out holding up her skirt. I come. This is her mission. This is her duty. It is her duty to communicate with and appease the ancient trees. There was no reason for anyone else to go up front, especially, there was no reason for her little Greet to go up front. Why? Sitting opposite her, who was examining her, Elder Melancilla's disciple reached out and pulled her, but did not hold her back. Watching the skirt of her skirt fly by her fingertips, she stood up from the table and was about to cast an acceleration spell on herself when she saw a ray of silver light rushing past. "Do not go." Sarala rushed over, put his arms around her waist, and dragged her back. How powerful is the silver dragon girl? Even in the form of an elf, not the form of a silver dragon, Elune couldn't even move forward with such a hug and a squeeze. She didn't dare to use magic to force it out, for fear of hurting Sarala. I could only keep twisting my body and shout softly. "Let me go. Let me go. Let me comfort the ancient tree. Little Gretel is there. I want to replace him." "Don't be impatient," Sarala used a gentle force to hold her feet off the ground. Jumping back again, and in an instant, he was back to the edge of the cabin. Greet said he was fine. He said he could withstand it. He said that meditating with the ancient tree like this is very good for spiritual growth, so let him bear it first. He really can't bear it anymore. "I'll call you." Her tone was urgent, but her voice was gentle. After saying this in one breath, he pushed Elune into the cabin and ran out again. Standing at the edge of the wooden house, stretching his neck, one eye was staring at what was going on in the house, and the other was staring at Greet. Gretel was still slumped on the tree, motionless, immersed in deep meditation. The breath on his body is deep and stable, grand and gentle, and it seems that there is no problem. And above the head, the guy who was swinging and screaming, with his whole body painted green, was swinging slower and slower, and the screams were getting softer, and gradually stopped. Elune slowly walked out of the hut. This time, her steps were much slower and lighter. Looking up, I saw Fanu hanging miserably upside down. He didn't dare to scream loudly when he saw her, he could only wink. The nose was bruised and the face was swollen, the whole body was in tatters, and the arms and legs were covered in bruises and bruises. It didn't need to be miserable, but it was already extremely miserable. Bend your knees, clasp your hands in front of your chest, making a kneeling gesture, and keep nodding your head up and down. After hanging for 7 days, his whole body lost weight, his cheeks were deeply sunken, and his hair was as dry as a handful of tangled grass. Elune felt angry even thinking about him, and she felt a little pitiful for him when she saw this defeated army. After pondering for a moment, Ashuej stepped forward lightly and walked closer, whispering, "Do you want to put him down? There was such a big movement in the ancient tree just now. If someone is thrown to the ground, something will really happen. She has turned into a panther and is ready to rush forward and tear the vines apart." This Fanu is indeed irritating and hateful, but asking him to die still doesn't conform to Gretel's original intention, and probably, to Elune's original intention as well? Elune hesitated. Originally, she didn't want to hang Fanu up forever, the fertility rate of the elves is so low and the population is so small. If Fanu committed something, he could only be punished with a few days of punishment, and he would not die if he really committed the crime. With her long and close connection with the ancient tree, originally, putting Fanu down was just a matter of thought, just like hanging him up and whipping him was just a matter of thought. But just now, the ancient tree had just made a violent noise, and it was Gretel who rushed over to comfort him and use his spiritual power to connect with the ancient tree. At this moment, she was a little afraid to communicate with the ancient tree. What if I disturb Gretel? What if it interferes with the communication between Gretel and the ancient tree and injures Gretel's mental power? With a little bit of mental energy, I felt like there was a barrier between me and the ancient tree. Elune froze on the spot, slowly raised her head, and spread her mental power over a wide area, scanning in all directions. On the top of Wangting Peak, there was an aura of anxiety and pain. The ancient trees in the distance, and even the world tree in the middle, were gently swaying uneasily, and were calmed down by the efforts of the elves. And among all the ancient trees that were swaying their branches and swinging their bodies, trying their best to vent their pain, the one in front of her exuded a particularly peaceful atmosphere, as if it had been integrated into the eternal moonlight. Greed worked hard to pull in the natural breath and the power of the emerald dream, covering the ancient trees in front of him. The fluctuations in the sea of consciousness were like stormy waves, almost shaking him out of meditation several times. Even if he only felt a little bit of the ancient tree's pain, even if the entire emerald dream shared it with him, he felt that his entire body and will were in the endless flames and would be burned to ashes anytime and anywhere. Damn it, Gretel thought, how do trees, or tree people, transmit perception? How does it feel that the root of a tree is burned, and its core of wisdom is burned? If they were humans or other animals, he could give them a major anesthesia, a local anesthesia, or a spinal anesthesia, but, do trees have such a thing as nerves? Do not care. Gretel broke the jar. He retrieved relevant knowledge from his meditation core and passed it on to the ancient tree. Cell. Nerve. Signal path. Delaying pain, or in other words, local anesthesia or spinal anesthesia, the part that cuts off the pain nerve. Let's just give you an example. Can you refer to this idea and temporarily block the pain? He communicated with the ancient tree silently. Just give it a try, try to temporarily block this pain, and then let go after this wave. If you are worried that you will not feel the danger, you can let go after a while, and then let go again after a while. The ancient tree shook its branches and leaves gently. Gretel continues to convince it. Or, try it on a tree root, the thinnest tree root. If it doesn't work, let's think of other ways. Not long after, the pain in my consciousness eased a little, and then a little less. Greet rested his forehead on the trunk of the tree, facing the tree, with a slight smile on his lips. Thank God, it seems to be working. After an unknown amount of time, the entire forest and the entire Wangting Peak gradually became quiet. The night birds returned to their nests, and the elves who were awakened returned to their original places. And Gretel straightened up and stretched greatly. Ouch, it's finally done. I keep lying like this, my neck, my back, my waist dash. Snapped. A branch hung down from the top of the tree, not very gently, and crushed him from shoulder to waist. Ouch. Gushu, are you giving me a massage? You're beating me up. A guy who repays kindness with vengeance. Before Gretel finished screaming, there were clattering footsteps and a small group of elves came running at full speed. He rushed to Aluni, stopped, and bowed respectfully. Ms. Aluni Imagil, the Presbyterian Council sent a message that a meeting will be held in 2 days to discuss matters related to the World Tree and the Well of Eternity. I would like to ask, is it convenient for you to attend in 2 days? Gretel popped his head out instantly, his eyes shining. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Today's state is particularly bad. There are only 4,000 words left, there are still 3 more updates left. Cat will continue to work hard from tomorrow. Thanks to @Uchiha Kantetsu for the 600 starting coins.